What if everyone went blind? It's 8:41 a.m. A driver is merging onto the freeway. A surgeon is mid-incision. A pilot is on final approach. And then, in the space of a single second, every single human being on Earth loses their sight. Permanently. What happens next isn't just a personal tragedy for 8 billion people. It's the fastest societal collapse, and the strangest rebirth humanity has ever faced. Phase 1, the first 60 seconds. Sight loss doesn't ask for a convenient time. In this first minute, roughly 1.5 million people are estimated to be driving somewhere in the world at any given moment. Every one of those vehicles becomes a projectile. In hospitals, surgeries stop mid-procedure. In the sky, thousands of commercial flights suddenly have blind pilots, though autopilot and air traffic control give many of them a fighting chance, at least until landing. Factories with moving machinery, construction sites with cranes, people walking near train platforms, the initial death toll from accidents alone, in just the first hour, could plausibly reach into the hundreds of thousands. Phase 2, the first 24 hours. Emergency services collapse first. Blind dispatchers can still talk on the phone, but blind paramedics can't drive ambulances, and blind firefighters can't navigate burning buildings. Governments would scramble to get emergency broadcasts onto every radio and speaker, because for the first time in history, a written message is useless to almost everyone. Braille literacy, even among people who were already blind before this event, sits at less than 10% in most countries, meaning the world's entire information system, built on visual text, goes dark along with everyone's eyes. Power grids, water treatment plants, and telecom networks are mostly automated, so for a while, infrastructure limps along on its own. But anything requiring a human to see a screen, a valve, or a warning light starts to fail within hours. Grocery stores, already looted or abandoned in the chaos, become impossible to navigate. Currency, coins and cards alike, becomes unreadable. Trust becomes the new currency. Literally, you'll have to take a stranger's word for what they're handing you. Phase 3, the first week. Ironically, the people best equipped to survive this new world are the roughly 40 million people who were already blind before it happened. Overnight, their skills, cane navigation, tactile reading, spatial memory, trained hearing, become the most valuable survival knowledge on the planet. Formerly sighted people, humbled and disoriented, begin seeking them out as teachers. Within days, informal rope lines and guide systems appear in cities, literal ropes strung between buildings so people can feel their way to water and food distribution points. Sound becomes the new primary sense. Church bells, whistles, and voice calls replace street signs. Hospitals, meanwhile, face a brutal triage. Any medical procedure requiring visual precision, most surgery, most diagnostics, becomes nearly impossible. Doctors who trained for decades on visual medicine now have to relearn their entire profession by touch and sound. Phase 4. Months 1 to 6, adaptation begins. Here's where the story shifts from disaster to something more interesting: adaptation. Audio description, once a niche accessibility feature, becomes the backbone of all media. Text-to-speech, already built into most phones, becomes the single most important piece of software on Earth. Cities begin retrofitting streets with textured pavement, audible crosswalk signals, and voice-activated everything. Agriculture adapts through touch-based sorting and voice-guided machinery. Manufacturing shifts toward tactile quality control. Even something as basic as cooking gets reinvented, kitchens redesigned around smell, sound, and touch cues instead of sight. Braille literacy programs become the most urgent education initiative in human history, taught not just to children but to entire adult populations. Universities scramble to convert their entire visual curriculum, diagrams, textbooks, lab work, into audio and tactile formats. Economically, entire industries vanish almost overnight: visual art, film, most video games, fashion photography, traditional advertising. An entirely new industries boom: audio engineering, tactile design, tools, and assistive tech, tour guides for practically everything. Phase 5. Year 1 and beyond. By the 1-year mark, humanity hasn't just survived, it's rebuilt around a fundamentally different relationship with the world. Cities are noisier, but more communal. Strangers talk to each other constantly, because voice is now the primary way to identify who's nearby. Some researchers believe other senses, hearing, touch, even a rudimentary echolocation ability, would sharpen over time, the way it does in people who lose their sight naturally. Studies on blind individuals show measurable changes in how the brain repurposes its visual cortex for sound and touch processing within months. At a species-wide scale, we might expect a similar, gradual neurological shift. But there's also profound loss. Generations of art, images, and visual memory would exist only in the recollections of those alive at the moment it happened. Children born after the event would grow up never knowing color, faces, or sunsets, only what can be described to them. It's a civilization forced to trade one sense for a radical dependence on three others, and, oddly enough, on each other. So would humanity survive total, sudden blindness? Almost certainly, though not without a staggering cost in the first hours and days. Millions of lives lost in the initial chaos, entire industries wiped out overnight, and a species forced to relearn nearly everything it once took for granted. But what's left afterward wouldn't just be a diminished version of the world we know. It would be a genuinely different civilization, slower in some ways, more fragile in others, but strangely more connected, too. A world that had to relearn, in the space of a single day, how to see with everything except its eyes. Maybe that's the strangest part of this whole thought experiment. Catastrophes like this don't just take something away. They force us to discover which of our abilities we never really needed sight for in the first place: empathy, memory, trust, community. Those don't disappear in the dark. If anything, they get sharper. So here's the question worth sitting with: if you had to lose one sense tomorrow, which one do you think humanity could adapt to fastest, and which one do you think would break us? Let me know in the comments, and if you want to see what happens when the opposite occurs, every human suddenly losing their hearing instead, let me know that too, because that video might be next. For time being, open your eyes and enjoy the world.